former ACT MP and former regional councillor and former city councillor and lawyer Hilary Calvert, and she joins us now. Hilary, good morning to you. Sorry, I've kept you waiting. My apology. That was an interesting conversation, wasn't it? Because do we get offended about road signs or not?
I'm with where you and Paul, I think, landed at the end on this one. But I think if we get back to first principles, what's the point of the communication? If you write down words, there's a communication going on. What's the point of it? So a stop sign, the point of it is to very quickly tell you, stop. So use whatever you need to do that. If you need to go to a government department for help, then don't call it something that people don't understand. Quite a few people don't understand because they're not going to find it. If the point of the putting it down is to find it. So that's where I sit with those things.
So you would always
feel free to encourage me to.
No. I agree with you. I don't mind having a Maori name for an English department. Or for an English name department. I've just used Inland Revenue. I could have used the new Polytechnic they've started up. It's not called New Zealand Polytechnic, it's just Te Pukinga. Now, what does that tell me? Nothing. And they haven't even given us the courtesy of giving that an English translation. So at that point, I start to go, there's a political, cultural impetus at play here that is nothing to do with inclusivity. It's to do in a funny sort of way with exclusivity, isn't it?
It's to do with virtue signalling, partly. It could be to do it because it's gone to 100 miles an hour under this current government, and whether that's to do with an increased force from the Maori caucus, who would know, which is quite a formidable lot of people, and some very competent and good people, might I say. But it's almost as if Labour has been preparing itself for trying to scoop up Maoridom by saying, we, the government, are in partnership with you. Sort of end of story, and we'll do anything we can to make you feel important, and because of lots of years of us doing poor things, government official-wise, we're going to make up for it by trying to overdo the other side now, I think.
Now, Simeon Brown raised this over the weekend. He says, I'd just like to see the signs in English, for the reasons pretty much he gave. He was talking about practicality, really, rather than anything else. Yesterday, Christopher Luxon, the National Party leader, backed down on that issue after Chris Hipkins, the Prime Minister, accused him of dog whistling or trying to engender some sort of race hatred against Maori. I mean, that was pretty clear, that accusation from Hipkins yesterday. Luxon backed down. What do you take from that exchange?
I take from that exchange that Luxon hasn't yet, and the National Party are a bit frightened of it too, being leaders, which is why David Seymour is so effective. He shows leadership on topics. What the two main parties are doing is floundering about, seeing if they can outdo each other in PC-ness and other sort of crap, and will this upset the polls tomorrow morning? What we want really is leadership governing our country, and understanding of where that leadership might take us. Not individual crap about if you wake up in the morning and that they've passed the port in the wrong direction or over the wrong shoulder or something. Leadership's what we're after, and he hasn't yet, Luxon hasn't yet he's not comfortable enough in his own skin, I don't think, politically at this point, to be quick enough to just do what David Seymour does.
Politics is about reading a public mood and about responding to it and having those, what we call, political instincts. I mean, that's what's made all the great prime ministers of the time, John Key, Helen Clark certainly had it. Even somebody like Jim Bolger had those sort of political instincts and characteristics. Luxon doesn't appear to have any of them. I don't know who he is. Do you?
Well, I don't want to know who he is. I want to know what he would do at the end of the day. That's what matters. So,
but he seems. Okay, I'll expand upon that. He seems to be a technocrat in the proper sense of the word, rather than a politician. Are we ready for a technocrat as Prime Minister?
We're ready for I think, a change in what our politicians are going to do at the end of the day. We'll be distracted on the way past by this and that, and if I hear people who say, I really didn't like what Christopher Luxon said yesterday morning or whatever, and it was something trivial, what I know is they're a Labour Party supporter. That's all I know. Because they don't want to hear from Christopher Luxon. I disagree with it. That's separate to where we should be going, which is getting back to what are you guys going to do? What are those guys going to do?
Well, again,
what's possible, because it's the art of the possible.
And again on that, though, National flip-flopped in the last 48, 72 hours on housing density. Now, it was a stupid policy to start with that they agreed. They let Labor off the hook in a huge way by agreeing, and now they've gone back and said, we got it wrong. Now, that seems to have been announced on the fly by Christopher Luxon, and then the housing spokesman, Bishop, came in and said, no, we're going to change our policy, etc. Does that give us any confidence that they know what they're doing?
What it tells you is that they didn't sell an idea properly. They had an idea. They should have looked at it again, especially after the floods in Auckland, and thought, unless we're going to sort out infrastructure and things, it's all very well saying dense housing is, easier for trains to get to.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, we might end up all flooded if we don't sort out other infrastructure too. So there's whole lots of stuff going in the middle of that pile, and they needed to sell very simply why they were having a second look at it, which is what they were doing. And they because the mainstream media is so pro-left, as it were, in general, not particularly pro-Labour, but pro-left, they let, on the whole, Carmel Cephaloni get away with saying, well, we're not sure, we're not committed to it either, actually. We might change it. So those guys are doing a flip-flop, but we might do it too. But they didn't call it a flip-flop, what they were going to do. And she was let away with them saying, well, that's a flip-flop from you too. You're just like them. Why didn't they say it?
The other aspect of this too, over the weekend, obviously the Labour Party, they've worked out what their attack strategy is going to be. It's pretty obvious. They've characterised National and ACT as the coalition of cuts. Their argument will be that if you vote for either of those two parties, you are going to have stuff taken away from you. David Seymour has been quite up about it, says, yes, that's right, we are going to have to reduce government spending. It can't continue at the moment. We don't have the money to pay for all the goodies. We are going to have to prioritise. I guess the question I'd be having you is, from your experience in politics, how effective is it going into an election agreeing that you are going to be cutting aspects of government and public spending?
I think you need to think carefully about what you're going to cut, because quite clearly billions of dollars have been spent recently that went absolutely nowhere sensible at all, where it could have gone to nurses' wages, teachers' wages, good teachers' wages, good nurses' wages, whatever. And so it's to do the right connections there. But everyone knows that there's a whole lot of spending being wasted. Everybody knows that despite the fact that we've spent more than we ever have, I would guess, we haven't got more than we've ever got. We're worse off than we were having spent more money. So it's to disconnect in voters' minds the idea that giving the government more money will make you better off. And I think people are already halfway unconvinced because about the approach of let us spend your money for you better than you, because they're saying, I'd like a tax cut.
Now, that hasn't been announced yet. That's the tax cut policy of the Nats and Act. It'll be, obviously, the killer. Well, it's intended to be the killer policy for them coming into the election. Is that going to work? Will the middle class do what they did, I guess, when Don Brash was standing, trying to get National Party back into the fray? And he offered, a lot of people talked about iwi kiwi then, back in, I think it was the 2004 election. 2004? 2007. But he did talk about tax cuts, and a lot of New Zealanders voted for those tax cuts. Will that work this time?
Yes, I think they need to back up the hearse and let people smell the lilies, really, so as they understand what they're getting. But they're also, the government's being let away with because the media doesn't understand fiscal drag, most of them, get away with the idea that it isn't if a tax cut to not take $1 billion extra that you've taken because of inflation. That is not a tax cut. And somebody ought to let the ACT Party do it. They ought to be able to do it very well because they seem to be able to make the long, looking complicated things shorter. But it isn't that complicated. What happens is that they take more. As inflation rises, your income rises, and the proportion that the government takes of your income goes up. And it goes up having you not done anything. Unlike, it's interesting that housing-wise, people think that when there's a new assessment of the value of your home, that your rates will go up. So they think, I've had quite a few people who are quite intelligent people, thoughtful people, say, well, the value of my house went up, doubled over the last 3 years, how am I going to afford my rates? And you say, well, if they all double, if they all go up the same amount, won't affect your rates. But they don't understand that. So that's another of those reasonably simple things that is hard to get through to people. You need good people to think how you present those messages. So
just let's characterise that. So what you're saying, or summarise that. So what you're saying is, because the tax brackets are stuck where they are, and there's no intention of moving them, then as my salary increases, simply due to inflation, trying to match inflation at the moment, not matching it, I'm actually going to be worse off because even though I might have got my 5% salary increase, I'm now into another tax bracket. I will get taxed more. The tax bracket didn't move with the inflation.
Exactly. And you didn't, your income might have gone up 5%, but the net result of it is that it went up 4.5% because the government took some of it.
Okay.
More of it. So.
So it'll be so running. We can just sort of run forward, I guess, 4 months, a month out from the election. We're looking at a National and Labour offering tax cuts, and Labour and the Greens saying they're coming in to cut money. So we are the status quo. We'll keep things here. One of the things I noticed in the budget, and I guess you did too, Hilary, was how much spending this government is going to be doing, or new spending that was announced, not this year, but after the election, so that it's not meant to come in until either April of next year or the 1st of February or whatever, so that they can offer that as a carrot, can't they? They can say, if we don't get re-elected, the stuff we announced in the budget won't happen, yeah?
Yes, but it's interesting that even like one of the major ones, the 2 to 3 year old preschool thing, which is the government has less investment on preschool education in New Zealand than in most countries, most comparable countries. That was supposed to be a big flagship, isn't this wonderful thing? And immediately that managed to turn sour. And it turned sour because of something that the government keeps doing, and we should call them out on it. Like, in that case, they said, you will not be allowed to insist that people take more than 20 hours free. You know, you can have 20 hours free, but the childcare centre can't insist you come for 30 hours so they can get your money back on the extra 10. You have to be allowed to just come for 20, just do the free one. And the ratios that they've paid for, they've bought the government, is a 1 to 10 ratio. And childcare centres say even the government's own policy stuff says the ratio should be like 1 to 8 or something for this age group. So the government's pretending to fund totally the cost of quality 20 hours a week education, but it isn't.
Well, that was fascinating. We talked about that last week, I think, on this specific issue. In fact, over the weekend, ironically, I was talking to one of the largest retailers of childcare in New Zealand, or one of the largest providers of childcare in New Zealand on exactly this point. And he said, yes, exactly what you do, you know, there's no compensation. But what he did say to me, and he pointed out, was they announced the policy with no detail. And then they said, well, we'll leave the Ministry of Education and the childcare providers to work out the detail before it comes into operation, which is it the 1st of February, I think, next year. So it was, again, a bit of smoke and mirrors, wasn't it, that announcement? They knew.
Yes.
They knew they didn't have the detail. I suspect they knew exactly what the childcare providers were saying to them. You haven't really compensated us. This is going to cost us money to provide. And yet at the same time, they went, but we haven't worked out the detail, and that will be worked out over the next 6 or 7 months. That's extraordinary. I'm struggling to remember any time in politics where that happens.
Yeah, is it that, well, there's 2 options we have. Either they are the devil, that lies in the detail.
Yep.
Not generally the devil, but the one that lies in the detail, and they knew about it.
Yep.
And they're poorly motivated, bad actors, so to speak. Or they didn't, in which case would you really want them governing the country on press releases like that with no understanding of where they're going with it?
Yeah, but surely the boffins in the ministry...
Which do they hope we think they are?
I know, but surely the policymakers and the bureaucrats, the advisors, who tell them what this is going to cost, Treasury, who must have run their rule over this themselves, surely they must have been aware of the problem with the detail, Hilary, you'd think, before they announced the policy.
Yeah. Well, the Treasury, maybe they're saying it will work it out later because that means they haven't had Treasury advice officially. Mm. And so you can't OIA get through the Official Information Act, the information from Treasury, because Treasury seems to be one that we still have some in-house people giving policy advice. And a thing that would be dear to your own heart, the ministry has probably sent out the policy advice for contractors to do in Australia or somewhere.
Yes, yes.
We don't seem to have good policy, internal policy people, and that's the very people we should have. We can get it out by contractors all the way through. But once we contract our policy advice, geez, it turns to crap.
All right, now just changing the topic entirely, but only because you're living there, and I've just seen in my local newspaper today, and this is apropos, I suspect, of a problem that is going to be New Zealand-wide, but it started at Otago. I see that there is a protest for tomorrow, protesting about the staffing and funding cuts at Otago University. Long and short of it is that Otago University has got not enough money, and they're going to be cutting a series of, it would appear, both academic and support staff to try and balance their budget. That means cutting a series of academic courses as well, and so on. Otago University has plummeted in the last 10 years in terms of its academic ratings internationally. It's now got this problem. Former alumni and Finance Minister Grant Robertson said that he's a bit concerned about it, and he's hoping to have a look, quote unquote. Is there something wrong at Otago University?
Yeah, we've been there, haven't we, on the regional council?
Yes.
About ministers saying, I just want to peer up your kilt about that one.
Mm. Is there something wrong at Otago University,
that's what he's doing with this, isn't he? I don't think I think there's been a bit of a perfect storm, and I think what's happened is that what it used to have back when I was at uni, and the husband was at uni, and he was president of the AUSA back when it wasn't a pack of prefects. The University Council had 30 people or something on it, whatever.
That's right.
It's got a lot fewer now, and it doesn't. And so the political appointments, the Labour Party people on there and the likes, and there might be National Party people on there who are also politically, I don't know. But, I understand Claire Curran's on, and David Clark's just been appointed as the councillor, I'm thinking, whatever, for when he finishes politics. I think that council has been captured, and we've now got a vice-chancellor who we don't know. Is he here? Is he not? We have no idea. He's away on something. Might be sick leave. And we've got a temporary person who mightn't have been chosen as Vice-Chancellor in the first place, but, was chosen as for acting.
Yeah, nonetheless, though, putting it all to the council, is the reality, that they're cutting staff, they're cutting numbers. Is this going to be repeated throughout New Zealand? Is Otago a unique case?
Yeah, it is going to be repeated throughout New Zealand, and what's important to me, I think, is for all of us to get together throughout New Zealand who care about the universities and encourage whatever government to promise that they will fund universities with a cost of living increase or whatever they need to do to make it keep working, because it's a problem throughout New Zealand and all of the universities will suffer. And it may be that some with high endowment funds mightn't for a while, but because it's permeated with academic integrity not being important, but again passing the port important, we've lost the idea that they are independent thinking places. Well, we're supposed to be encouraging the next lot to be independent thinking.
Well, maybe that's one of the reasons they've lost their reputation in part two, Hilary. Thank you very much for joining us. Much appreciated. Talk to you again next Tuesday. That's Hilary Calvert, the former ACT MP, former Dunedin City Councillor, former Otago Regional Councillor. She's got a very good handle, and national columnist. She's got a very good handle on politics in general.